Thank you very much. What Paul said is absolutely right. I'm Charu Kokate. I'm a partner at Safdie Architects. And we are known for designing iconic projects. And we've been known, since in the early 1960s when Moshe Safdie designed Habitat 67. And we've designed many projects since then. We've designed convention centers, we've designed museums, we've designed big buildings, mega structures. All of them have been landmark projects, including our own Marina Bay Sands and Jewel. And I've been involved in many of these projects, and I can tell you, designing iconic projects is a real misconception. Because as you all know, clients, what Paul said is absolutely right. Clients come to us and say, hey, can you give us some wow spaces? Can you give us some Instagrammable spaces? Because that's now the in thing. And what we realize is that you can't really start designing saying, hey, I'm going to create this Instagrammable space. We are all architects and designers here. We all know that when people come to us, they say, they give us their program, right? They come and give us their design program. But if you think about it, that's such a single-dimensional information because it's only their needs and requirements. And if you start, that's a great starting point for design. But if you start with that, you're going to get very limited to it. So this is where I always think, So what makes a building icon? What is iconic anyway, We always say, whenever you get something from the client, you have to take a pause. And what that pause means is, you have to think about whatever you're going to design, how does that impact the land? How does that impact the environment? How does that impact the community? And you have to really think more beyond all these things, beyond the requirements. For us, it's almost an opportunity to come up with something innovative, to think outside the box, to think about more than what the functional requirements are. And that have often led to very innovative solutions, and even taking getting away from the traditional design, coming up with solutions, coming up with new building typology, like what we did at Jewel Changi Airport. Jewel, the site was very tight. It was located in the heart of the airport. It was between the control tower, that's a red dot that you see, and the Terminal 1. Open air car park with the train running through it. The train could not be moved, train could not be changed. But even though it was very challenging to design such a program for this tight site, we thought of the community, and we thought we wanted to create a timeless attraction, an attraction which would be very natural, an attraction that would be loved by all. We created this amazing garden around a waterfall. This garden is open to public, open to community 24 hours. And this garden has there's no advertisement of that sort. It's a very pure garden. The waterfall created new challenges for us. This was our ambition, but the waterfall created new challenges for us. The toroid structure could not be symmetrical to avoid the water falling on the train. But we worked with our engineers at Bureau Happel. They helped us rationalize the geometry. They helped us with coming up with a beautiful, light, thin grid shell structure that could cover the space and the planting. We worked with environmental engineers to design the comfort for human beings, for the trees, for the spaces underneath. And the reason I'm saying you all these things is because you cannot do these projects in isolation. It's always teamwork. We work with the best engineers to come up with solutions that really helps us come up with, solve the problems, come up with innovative ideas. Our environmental engineers also helped us map the sunlight, the daylight that would come into the building. That informed our landscape architects to selection of trees, what kind of trees should be located. Like at the top, we have canopy trees where there's a lot of light. In the sections, in the forest valley, the little bowl that we created, we have tall trees allowing light to come through. But the real challenge was always during construction, very tight site. The site was a challenge, the train was a challenge, the control tower was a challenge. We did top-down construction, and this is an image showing you how tight the site was. The contractor had fixed deadlines. It was a very stressful process. Even though we always felt the amazing thing was during construction, it was always we had this feeling that this was going to be something very special. We were building something, we were designing something that was very unique. My team and I, we would go to the site every single day and really marvel at what we were creating. Even during the stressful process, there were moments of wonder watching everything coming together. I would enthusiastically send the progress pictures to Moshe in Boston to show what we were doing. And we were really eagerly waiting for the project to open, because until then it was just about us and our building. We challenged the notion of an airport. We brought in nature in a public space in the center of an airport. This garden that you see is something that was never thought of. Changi never thought of that we would have a garden inside the building. In the middle of the airport, we've created a community space. This garden is not just a display of plants, or it's a botanic display of, botanic garden, but it is a garden of wonder and grandeur. It has introduced people to the wonder of plant life. This garden and the waterfall inside the garden really creates this amazing serene atmosphere, which is unheard of. This is a new typology that we've created, where aviation facilities, landside aviation facilities, where retail areas and an attraction comes together. We eagerly waited for this day to open. And what we saw was amazing. This is the first building thing that people see when they approach the airport. When you come into Terminal 1, this is the first view that you get. And that itself has formed a new gateway to Singapore. I really remember when the building opened and thousands of people flocked inside the airport. They were taking pictures, and they were just marveling at what they were seeing. And we did anticipate that, because we've created something special. We anticipated people to be very impressed by the scale, impressed by the surrounding. But what I did not anticipate was how this building would impact the people, how it would resonate, the space would resonate with people. It created a sense of wonder. There was a joy on everybody's face. It's almost like it's not just that day. I've been seeing it over time. And it really has created a generational happiness. When you see this light coming down from the sky, filtering through the trees, when you see the water falling from the oculus above, it's like rain. It's like being outdoors, not an indoor garden. And when you it's a magical moment when you see a rainbow in the water. You forget you're at an airport. And this is something that, I've seen on people's faces. The space completely changes in the evening, becomes a magic wonderland. Travelers are taking extra time to come to the airport, relaxing, and they're getting rejuvenated just visiting the place. Of course, locals are enthralled. The locals are so happy with whatever the space has to offer. And it's heartwarming, really, to see people in wheelchairs, senior citizens enjoying the garden and really sitting peacefully. And I've heard them say that it feels as if the project has been crafted for their needs, because their families don't have to worry about them. To the point that a few years ago, New York Times wrote an article in the newspaper saying that people should spend a day vacationing at Jewel. I mean, that's what the impact has been on people. Even today, people and the community have made it their icon. It has become their symbol. It's symbol of Singapore, symbol of the airport. You might say, hey, it's a very special structure with special needs. So how do you create something like that, something where people feel that they belong to the space on big projects, especially if the project has theaters and casinos and convention centers and hotels, a mega project? Marina Bay Sands is an example of that project. Marina Bay Sands is a great example of integrated urban planning and architecture. It is a microcosm of a city. The concept, we've been inspired by the concept of Roman spinal cities. The commercial hub of Marina Bay Sands, which is the casino, the theaters, the convention center, and the related spaces, are self-orienting. And our design seamlessly integrates the spaces with the surrounding urban environment, and by extending the city life both within the building and around the building. The massing configuration of these facilities really create a three-dimensional hierarchy addressing the issue of mega scale and by creating an urban landscape that relates to human scale. When we started the construction, even we were overwhelmed. We had worked on this project for a year, and we were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of it. I often wondered what people would think of it, even though we had designed it in a way that could relate to human scale by separating these buildings, by creating these independent structures. But since the day it has opened over time, this Marina Bay Sands and its public spaces have been seamlessly integrated in Singaporeans' lives. It attracts both locals and tourists. We designed public spaces integral with the architecture. We integrated the public spaces with landscape and natural light. And these spaces are where people come in, Singaporeans come in, the tourists come in. It's a gathering places for day and night with various activities and attractions. The waterfront promenade is one of the spaces. The design for the space was such that the adjoining buildings that you see were always lower in scale for really connecting with people and transparent so that the inside retail mall and the outside promenade would be one. This space is so popular. It's even whether it's hot sun, whether it's raining, people come over here. They flock together. It's almost like it's a gathering place for families. People come here and relax. They're joggers, they're bicyclists, use the space to really connect. It connects well to the city. In the evening, it's a completely different space. It transforms into a hub where locals and tourists come and enjoy the various food offerings, the various attractions. We had never anticipated movie premieres in the space. There are fashion shows, there are durian parties. Even the Art Science Museum, the sculptural form of the Art Science Museum, is used for projecting digital displays. The art pieces like Ned Khan's Vortex is very popular. People are mesmerized by seeing the swirling water. It is kind of a place to be. You see families sitting, relaxing, looking at the stunning Singapore skyline. In addition to this, we created another public space, which is the Sky Park, the 2.5-acre public space in the sky. The swimming pool, the observation deck, all these spaces are loved by everyone. The swimming pool, the 150-meter-long swimming pool, which spans from Tower 1 to Tower 3, is the biggest attraction. People from all over come here just with the aim of swimming in that pool. At sunset, finding a spot in the bustling crowd is a problem. It becomes a challenge, right? People wait for hours together just to capture the color of the day, color of the evenings, of the sky. It's worth the wait. It's magical transformation to see the change in the cityscape. It's really my favorite time to visit the Sky Park. So whether you're there looking at the lights of the city, whether you're there to take pictures of the fireworks, it's a must-see place. If you look at all tourist books and guides, it's a must-visit place. And I think that's what's made it very successful. It's like people loving to be there. People feel that it's their space because you don't even have to be a hotel guest to go and see the observation deck. And who would have imagined, really, doing yoga in the sky? This Sky Park has changed the way Singapore thinks about rooftops. This Sky Park has been a game changer, really, to see how people could use spaces in the sky, which otherwise were taken up by mechanical equipments and other things. Marina Bay Sands, as you all know, is a global phenomenon around the world and known as symbol of Singapore. It's also an example of how architecture can be a catalyst for economic growth and change. These are all both commercial projects. And, there is a case, I was talking to a friend, and he said that, oh, it's easy because these are commercial projects, you can create public spaces. Because his logic was, because, you know what, you can convince developers, maybe it's easier to convince developers to say, why can't we include some public space? It's going to increase the footfall. It will help you financially. It's going to help getting more people in the mall. But as architects and designers, when we work in cities like Singapore, which are densely populated, it is important that that we create something beyond what we have been given. It is important that we think about the community. It is important we think about the neighborhood. And that's exactly what we did for our office building, a headquarters for a local Singaporean company, Surbana Jurong. They chose a site away from the CBD area for the headquarters. We created a dynamic anchor project for the Jurong Eco District, Innovation District, that is intended for both the employees and the surrounding neighborhood and the big community. And the whole idea was to foster a getting together of people. The whole idea was allowing people, allowing the community to go through your building. We created a spine. This central spine forms a direct connection between the train station that you see over there, a public train station, and the neighboring community. It's a public street. This spine also connects the different office blocks and also interweaves exterior gardens and interior gardens. What you're seeing over here, there is something called the Eco Garden that already exists. So what we did was we brought the garden in our building. This clustering of medium-sized volumes around the spine, it really evokes almost an atmosphere of a village. It's a contrast to what people think of headquarters. Headquarters generally in Singapore are offices located in the tall towers in the CBD area, in the dense district, central business district. Our building is simple. Our building is something that has been there. This is welcoming. This is just opened 6 months ago. They welcomed the residents 6 months ago. We designed the elevations that could relate to the future projects. So since this is a pioneer project in that area, we designed the western elevation to relate to the future projects over there, while as the eastern cantilevered blocks that you see, the stacking of the blocks, allows gardens to penetrate through, allows gardens to grow around it, almost creating a treehouse effect for the employees inside. One of the things that I must say to you is that although it almost feels like you are working in the garden, each office block has abundant sunlight, abundant natural landscape, and abundant views outside. Seamless integration of the little gardens that we created between the towers, and the seamless integration with the eco gardens, with the neighboring eco gardens. We created a unique network of offices immersed in natural setting. You can see how the cantilevered tops us. And the intent behind designing this cantilevered building was to have the smallest footprint as possible touching the ground, almost like a light touch to the ground, so that we could have maximum planting coming through. We designed bicycle paths, and we designed infrastructure to support active mobility, not just benefiting the employees of the campus, but also the neighborhood. We tried to save as many trees as possible, the mature trees on site, and creating special courtyards that would bring natural light inside. So what you're seeing over here on level 1 is a public pedestrian street inside the building, and on the higher levels in the spine are the private offices of Surbana Jurong. This street connects blocks. At level 1, it connects gardens, and it connects people, because this has almost become a gathering spot for people to come and talk together. So on level 1, we have the garden where public comes and sits over here, enjoys. On the higher levels, we have the Surbana Jurong community enjoying the space. The campus design really believes that everyone should have abundant or optimum daylight and optimum access to light and to light and nature. Thus, we have been advocating to have a more balanced and collective work atmosphere that would be less stressful, that would be more creative. We managed to get natural daylight to filter through informal community spaces inside the building. Surbana Jurong campus has been designed for keeping both Surbana Jurong employees and the larger neighborhood, the greater neighborhood in mind. These are the spaces where everyone enjoys. We have public amenities on the level 1, like we have cafes that can be used by anybody. Anybody can go in there. We have mother's room, we have childcare, we have a clinic, we have a gym that is accessible to all, the whole neighborhood community. And I think that's changed the way how the company works. It's a new way of working. it's a new way of enjoying. And the offices that we've created in the gardens are so inspiring that they have become very flexible spaces, ad hoc gathering spaces. There's a lot of cross-pollination of ideas. And in addition to taking care and supporting the wellness of the 4,000 employees in the campus, we have also created community gathering spaces like this, like a multipurpose hall, which also has a sunken garden bringing in daylight to it. The campus has been designed really for everyone, not just for the Surbana Jurong community. And this is just an example of how even an office block can be connected to the neighborhood and not just being built in isolation. It has impacted the management's way of thinking. They are now committed to creating a nurturing environment, not just for their employees, but for the greater neighborhood. The buildings that I have shown you today have a lasting impact extending beyond just the users or the visitors and the local community. They serve as cultural landmarks and gathering places. They serve as they foster a sense of really an identity and pride amongst residents. They have become iconic symbols of Singapore, drawing tourists, drawing locals, impacting and boosting the economic and culture of the city. Because we truly believe architecture is more than just mere functionality. Like Paul mentioned in his speech, we are not just creating buildings. If it's a great building just to see great architecture, you go take a picture and say, wow, it's a great building. But these buildings have created a sense of belonging. These buildings have created a sense of pride. Recently, I was at a London airport, and they were showing, I was just standing at the gate, and they were showing some images, and they had an image of Jewel. A Singaporean gentleman standing next to me says, oh, we are really proud of this building. He didn't know who I was. And I think this sense of pride, this sense of belonging has really given the buildings iconic status. So what is iconic? Again, we ask. Iconic is something that people bestow the title on the buildings. It's not something that you can just create and say, make it iconic. Thank you.
Well, Charu, thank you very much for that. And I think you admirably fulfilled the task of distinguishing between the truly iconic and just, as it were, an adjective. Can I ask you, and I'm not quite sure how much you can say about this, but I think a lot of people are very interested in the latest stage for Marina Bay Sands, which is it's another tower on an adjacent site. And what's interesting me about that is this idea of building on success. I mean, you made this kind of world-beating proposition. The client, not unnaturally, would like to extend it, but you don't want to interfere with the original architectural concept, the logo, if you like. How much of a challenge was it to say, well, how do we add on to something which you might say you can't really add on to, or you wouldn't want to add on to in a way that might spoil it?
I cannot really say much about the project, but I can tell you one thing. More than us, the city of Singapore is protective about the buildings. They are being so careful about making sure that image doesn't change, because that has become so symbolic to Singapore. So whatever we are doing, whatever we are designing, we are making sure that we are not changing that, what you see over there. But we are going to enhance the whole neighborhood. So the community is definitely in our first thing on our list of things. Because when you create these projects, they are for a certain class of people, certain group of people, or certain people who enter these projects. We want to make sure that's not the case. We want to make sure it's designed for all. We want to make sure that it is going to get the same love and respect or ownership that we have for this project. So I think to answer your question really briefly is I think the city and the government is more protective than us. We are ready to take a risk and test it out, but they're like, no, we like this, don't change it, don't change it.
Thank you for that, because I wanted to raise this question, which is, not unprecedented in architecture, but I think you took it to new levels, which is the extent to which you've incorporated not just public space, but public thoroughfares into your projects. I mean, both MBS and Surbana Jurong have these public streets, which I think are kind of 24/7, 365. Were there any particular challenges from either client or public authority about how you manage these spaces? Or, you know, there must have been a time when somebody thought, well, can't we just gate them off at sunset or sunrise? How did you go about that?
I think the minute, let's take example of Surbana Jurong because it's a private office, right? The minute we said we don't want to design a headquarters, it needs to be a campus, it meant we were going to invite more people. And the minute you did that, the program had to change so that the level 1 of Surbana Jurong is going to be everything to do with public. So there are meeting rooms. But if you're visiting somebody from Surbana Jurong, you go to the meeting room. You don't go to their offices. So of course there has to be a shift in the programming of it, where you have the private offices starting at a certain level. This becomes a public space. But it's also more of, takes a little time to convince the client about that, because everybody comes with their own idea. Surbana Jurong had their own idea about their vision, how the world should see them, you know, as a company, as a management team. And this is like a changing their idea. So yes, it is challenging. At the same time, though, we are very confident that it is going to be so successful that they are going to be very happy contributing to the community around.
I think there's another aspect of both those projects. And in fact, going right back to some of the earliest work of the practice, like the Habitat in Montreal from the 1960s, where whatever the formal brief, as architects, rather than responding to complexity, you inject complexity, because actually in both these instances, I mean, you add layer and layer of activity and potential different sorts of uses and users. Is that a fair comment?
It is a fair comment. We also acknowledge the fact that there could be a straightforward solution, which we don't go to. And I think that's why when I say that you need to take a pause, because it's very tempting. You get the program and you want to start doing it. And it's very tempting. The minute you take a break and you say, hey, what does the neighborhood look like? What are we going to do with this? Are we going to build in isolation, or are we going to do something that's going to be part of the whole neighborhood? During Marina Bay Sands, I have to tell you this, during Marina Bay Sands, as the buildings were coming up, we could hear this chatter around, and, oh, it's not that interesting, is it? It could have been something twisted form, all that stuff. And I think to make a timeless design, I think for a design to last, it has to be simplified. It has to last, have a longer life. And I think that when whatever looks simple, for designing, for constructing, is not simple. You know, Jewel was one of the toughest projects that we've done when it came to really the coordination exercises, the whole thing, to make it seem so seamless that people don't even believe that the planters are not just planters, but they are really where we have all our air conditioning, where we have all our services in there. So I think, yes, we do make it a little difficult for ourselves and for our contractors.
Because that raises the question about the diagram in your work, because you showed a couple of Moshe's delightful kind of sketchy intimations of what a project might be and what the relationships would be. But I'm guessing that there are other kind of evolved diagrammatic and programmatic drawings, which we rarely see. Is that the secret life of the practice, how that kind of thinking process then ends up with what you build?
I think I have to tell you honestly, there's no secret. There's really no secret. When we start, in our office, we never start with our site. Never. First thing, you won't believe, first thing, we do a model of the whole context. If it's a block, whole block, you know, all around the space. First we start with that. We start looking at how are we going to integrate whatever you're seeing over there. Sometimes it's really messy. So you try to say, can we put some order to it by our building? Sometimes you look at it and you say, does this building need to stand out or does it need to blend? Marina Bay Sands actually blends with the neighborhood, blends with downtown Singapore. It's not like standing out very different, you know. And I think that's what it is. Surbana Jurong, right now, because that there are not too many buildings around it, it looks different. But once it's built, it's going to be totally embedded with the whole thing. So it's not, no secret. It's really very traditional way you could say what we learn in schools. Think about the context. Think about the daylight. It's free. You know, think about the nature. That's how we start, actually.
I suppose that brings us on to the question of nature, because I think increasingly in the work, and the most obvious recent example, but also Surbana Jurong, is this question of the relationship of the man-made to the natural. And this is obviously something that the practice has thought long and hard about. And I wonder whether this stems from a kind of a general philosophical approach to what you think the relationship should be, or is it a more kind of pragmatic thing of just accepting that it's a smart idea for all sorts of functional reasons to involve greenery in and outside buildings, or perhaps a mixture of both, some philosophical, some pragmatic?
I'm really proud to say that, you know, our office has been doing this for the last 55 years. Nature has been the key thing that Moshe had an idea when he did, in 1965, he did Habitat 67, where he said everyone should have a garden. That was his theme. We've just extended the garden part of it from housing to commercial buildings to offices. What's also happening, it's also a reaction to what's going on in the world. Cities are getting dense. And you know, today's recreation, at least in Singapore, is not going out to a garden, but going to a mall. It's like where, because it's air-conditioned atmosphere, people like to go there, families like to go there. I think it's almost reintroducing nature in today's urban world. And it becomes a great big exercise about urban design and architecture coming together. And it's been going on we've been trying to do that for the last 55 years. And I think we are successful now doing it in more commercial buildings. You know, the clients believe it more. And I think after COVID, I mean, these buildings have been designed before COVID. After COVID, it's become even more important because people are more isolated. So it's been going on for the last 50 years.
I mean, there's a sense, particularly with the Surbana Jurong campus, that you've treated that project as though it's a landscape project into which buildings have been injected, rather than a building project which is then supplemented by landscape. Would there be any truth in that? I ask this because I've increasingly noticed in projects the increasing importance of landscape architecture and landscape architects, and this sort of analysis of nature right from the outset of a project, where the primacy of the built form is actually, it follows or takes a lead from its surroundings, rather than the old thing of treat everything as a cleared site and we'll get the landscape architect afterwards to plant something.
Well, first thing, for Surbana Jurong, it was a green site. So it was a shame to take away planting and put a building in there. Second thing, it was more of an urban design exercise. It was creating an urban street within the building, because you are connecting to a public transportation, and you're connecting, that's going to be used by everyone. So we are trying to make people believe, let's go through our building. If it rains, if it's hot, they can go through our building. So is it a landscape project? Is it a project that we added landscape to it? No. It's almost, if it was possible to just excavate a little bit and build it, we would do it. I think it is more of making sure that the building has least impact on that site that was built. It is more to that. And it's also making up for the landscape we took out. And also making sure, you know, people will not go out if it's hot. They won't go out and sit in the garden if it's raining. So also creating these indoor gardens which are protected, which have a roof on them, so that people can sit and enjoy. It's more of introducing them to nature. So these are not really very, I should say, manicured gardens. You know, this is just more of introducing to nature, making it less stressful, making it a happier environment.
And for an international practice, is there anything particular or specific about Singapore that makes it different designing here of course, you know, it's a tropical climate compared with doing something in Europe or in Canada. But are there specific, would you say, national characteristics that have informed the work that you've done here?
For residential, one thing we have done is that because it's a tropical country, like you mentioned, for residential, we are making sure that the apartments have maximum exposure to outside, natural light. We have nice terraces so people can sit outside. To give you an example, we have done a residential project over here in Singapore called Sky Habitat. And during COVID, we received so many emails from the residents over there saying, thanking us for creating the spaces that people could sit out and enjoy because they were so tied up or so, you know, caught up in their own apartments, they could not step out. So I think that for Singapore, it's not so much about using glass facades and making residential apartments look like office buildings. I mean, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make sure the scale is right. We're trying to make sure that people can step out. We're trying to make sure that they enjoy the tropical climate. It doesn't have to be air conditioning all the time.
I mean, in a post-COVID environment all over the world, employers are finding it quite tough getting people to come back to the office, or at least 5 days a week. And I wonder whether there's anything about the way you designed Surbana Jurong, which incorporates, well, you've mentioned a couple, but you might want to elaborate a little bit so that actually the office becomes, instead of a workplace which you'd rather be at home, the office becomes an object of desire that people actually would enjoy the commute because they know that when they arrive, they're going to be somewhere that actually is better than their home. Would you like to elaborate on that a bit?
It's a contrast to where Surbana Jurong's offices were before to what they are having now. So by creating a nurturing environment, I think it has helped a lot. One thing that was very important, I must tell you, is that how the campus design, the openness of the spaces, the linking of the towers, the gardens, how that has influenced a company's thinking. See, we don't try, when we design, you don't try to make these changes in a company's thinking. But this has completely changed. And because people spend so many hours in offices, you know, people spend 8-10 hours in offices, this has become a more nurturing environment. And I think it has definitely impacted the way the employees at Surbana Jurong think when they come to work. We've just heard only compliments and about how wonderful it is to work, because it's almost a free space. It's a very cool thing for them to say, let's go meet, let's have a meeting in the cafeteria, let's meet in the garden. You know, it's something very nice for them. So I think it definitely has improved the way they work.
Now, this is a cheeky question, but I always ask this because architects who design wonderful workspaces for people, I'm always interested in their own offices. Now, in the design of the workspaces for Moshe Safdie, what's that like? What are your own offices like?
Lot of natural light. Our office in Boston is covered with ivy throughout. You don't even see the building. It's all planting. Our office in Singapore is a lot of natural light. It's cozy. In Boston also it's cozy. It's almost, there is, and I'm not going to exaggerate when I say it is a sense of belonging. If you ask any of our team members, they'll say, oh my God, it's our office. People think of it as their own, you know. I think that's the beauty of it. I think when you create spaces that you create which have a sense of belonging, people like to come to work. And I think that's what it is. I think you should visit our Boston office or our Singapore office. You're most welcome. You know, I think you'll like it. I think it's a very cool spaces. They're not fancy. And one thing I want to tell you, when we were designing Surbana Jurong, one comment I made was about headquarters building is a status symbol. It's our headquarters. You have very expensive material finishes to it. It shows the success of a project. I say Surbana Jurong is a very rich project. Why? Because the luxury is not so much in highly polished marble. The luxury is abundant sunlight, beautiful nature around you, which is rare in cities. So I think that's what we believe in, is what we give to our client.
That idea of a community in a building is obviously a theme in the work. And as we draw to a close, can I ask you, When you're designing, whether it's for a corporate client or whether it's designing with a public authority, and you're thinking about all the users, both public and private, what sort of consultation exercises do you go through to find out what it is that users might like? I mean, is that part of your working process? Or do you think that, you know, after 55 years, you kind of have quite a lot of evidence about what it is that people like and enjoy?
Every project, no matter how long you've worked, is a challenge to start with. Convincing people to invest something more is always a challenge. Everybody wants the value for their money, no matter how big the developer is. So, yes, but we do have a very strong feeling inside that this is what people are going to want. This is what people like. This is what something, it's a matter of creating excitement. It's a matter of creating what people are going to come back. You see, one of the things that I have to tell you, iconic doesn't mean a photo, it's a beautiful picture. Iconic meaning making people visit, belong, they want to visit it over again and again and again. Jewel is filled with people during holidays. It's not tourists, it's all the locals, you know. People enjoying it, that's what is really what it is. So I think we have a very strong sense of what people would like. Authorities are very happy with us. The government is very happy with us. We are providing for the people. They are very encouraging, especially in Singapore, it's very encouraging to design for the community.
So a final question, which one could ask of any significant architect, you know, working in more than one country. What do you see as the new challenges facing architects and architecture and the requirements for the coming decades of the 21st century?
I think this craze for high-rise buildings, I think high density, I think that's one of the big problems. Housing, we want to create housing. We know that people need housing. I think it's a requirement, but trying to create housing which is much more comfortable, the scale is more comfortable. Buildings are getting so much bigger and longer and huge. I think that's a real concern. You walk around and you see really like big walls being built, and that's a concern. I think, of course, environment is a concern. Sustainability is a concern, but more than that, I think the scale is something that we are always very conscious of, even though we do mega-scale projects. I think the density is a real concern in the housing market and in the office buildings.
I think that's an appropriate note to draw to a close, because our next session, which is all about a Singaporean context, is Chen Seong Tan, who's going to be talking on this stage at 11:40. Precisely about that question of housing provision and density and the implications for ever-increasing population, not just in Singapore, but across the world. But for the moment, Charu Kokate, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, and welcome to Singapore. Welcome to Marina Bay Sands.